All right. Hi, Lindsay.
Hey, Louise. How are you?
Good. How are you? Welcome.
Living my best life.
Yeah.
Living my best life. How about you?
I was just trying to stay awake during these cloudy days.
Oh my God. You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Yeah. I'm one of those people whose mood gets affected by the weather. So since it's been overcast all weekend, I'm like, I don't want to do anything.
Right? You just like curl up on the couch with a blankie and
yeah. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of stuff to binge watch, so that's fun.
Gotta sit with myself. This is stupid.
Like, oh my God, I guess I can read. But welcome to Let's Talk About It with
Lindsay Knapp.
Yay! All right, so Lindsay, why are we here today?
Today we're going to talk about rabble rousing.
Rabble rousing?
As I like to call it. I call myself a professional rabble rouser.
Ooh.
But, you know, what I think maybe talk about what makes a good activist or what makes a movement successful. What are the elements of that and how to put those pieces together while not losing your mind.
Yeah. We're living in a time where rabble rousing is really important because it just seems like every time we turn on the news or look at our phones, there's someone somewhere trying to take away something, like a right or it just feels like we're going backwards. And it's nice to see how everyone's like, no, we're not comfortable with this. This is inappropriate.
Yeah. There's something that Dr. King said that it was the moral arc bends towards justice.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, for anybody who's worried about any kind of issue, you know, you got to think of a really long arc, and you're trying to move a huge body of people through that arc, and so you can't do that quickly. You know, like if we're going to use a biblical reference, you know, Moses walking all those people through the desert and all those things, like that's a whole lot of people, right? Like you're trying to rally all the people to get them to go from point A to point B. And in that reference, you know, they had to wander the desert for 40 years, right? So, you know, so hopefully we're not wandering for 40 years plus, but it definitely takes time. So I do a lot of rabble rousing. That's why so as a professional rabble rouser, I do a lot of work with sexual assault survivors, and so I'm yelling at like the military a lot to not retaliate against service members who report a sexual assault. So a lot of like women's rights stuff, a lot of human rights stuff, and then on the LGBTQ side of the house, I run a LGBTQ resource center in a rural town I'm in Sanford, North Carolina. And so in North Carolina in general, it's kind of wild with all the different laws that are being passed or not being passed, or, you know, gender identity is apparently up for debate, you know, and all these kinds of things. You know, drag performances are up for debate. And so it's like you said, when you turn on the TV and you kind of see there's 100 different things going on, you know, what do you do and how do you move forward? The first thing I'd like to tell people is that you can't fix everything, and to maybe just pick one thing, like, you know, because there's always something, right? Like you may want to like save the polar bears, save the rainforest, save the environment, you know, Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ rights, reproductive rights, you know, access to healthcare, access to affordable housing, you know, and the list goes on, right? Like there's just too much for one person to effectively make a difference in too many categories. And not that one person can't, but for somebody who's maybe starting out to just pick one and just be like, you know what, I'm going to pick one. I'm going to try really hard on this one thing, and I'm going to let somebody else carry the torch for something else.
Yeah.
So giving yourself permission to be like, you know what, I can't save all the puppies today, right?
Yeah.
Like I can't save all the animals in the shelter, right? Like I love all the animals, all the things, but like I'm going to pick my one thing. I'm going to stay on that road. I'm going to go on that road. I'm going to do a good job. And then as I'm able to have more space, then maybe I can add in saving the puppies, right? Or education, or, poverty, or any other kind of thing. But that's where I tell folks to start at least, because I feel like it's emotionally exhausting, like whatever you see on the news, it's kind of, the news is, it's supposed to, in the best case, the news is supposed to provide you information and let you know the status of what's going on in the world. But in the worst case, they're trying to amplify their own message, get more viewers, and all those kinds of things. And so it may be hard for you as human to know, like, okay, what is the goal of this news agency in this particular instance? Are they trying to inform me, or are they trying to amp me?
Yeah.
So then even as you're sitting here, if it's a news network that's trying to amp you, you may be getting amped.
Yeah.
Right. And so the lay of the land may not be as desolate as it may seem, but even if it is that desolate, there's always something we can do, in knowing that whatever it is, it's going to be slow. So knowing that it's a marathon, not a sprint, I think is something really, really important. Like, you need patience, you need grit. But I think the hardest part to sustaining any kind of movement is that you have to do an intense amount of work on yourself.
Yeah.
And you cannot do anything else until you do that. And so that's like what I see. Like when anybody's trying to like join me on any of my little adventures, a lot of times they show up, angry or mad or sad or whatever they are. And it's not bad that they feel that way. They feel how they feel, but you can't sustain action in that state. So I call it like building the bench. So I'm like looking at that human, like, okay, I'm glad that you want to help me, but how can I help? How can we help you heal and get on this healing journey and kind of, build yourself up a little bit more before we put you back in the fight? Because the analogy I like to use is, so since I'm a veteran, I'm going to use a military analogy. So it's like being shot on the battlefield. Okay. Like if you get shot on the battlefield, and you're with your buddies and you're all fighting a thing, somebody's going to pull you off, and you're going to get triage. You're going to go to the hospital. You're going to get seen by a medic or what have you. But you're going to want to get back in that fight, right? Like you're like, those are my buddies. They're out there dying. I want to go get back in the fight. I'm going to do the thing. But you just can't, right? Like you're just not mission capable. Like you're not going to be effective. You're going to actually harm them by dragging your hobbly leg, or wherever you got shot back in on the battlefield. So
because like you can't really do as much when you're bleeding. Like you're going to cause more harm to yourself. And
right.
Yeah.
And so that's how I feel a lot of times. It's like I'm pulling people off the battlefield and triaging them and reminding their happy asses, like, you can't go back in yet. Like you got to.
All right. We're talking about triaging.
Yeah. So what I like to tell people, it's like after you've been shot and you're getting pulled off the battlefield, you can't really go back in. Like you got to kind of sit still and heal. And so normally it's like after the person has been shot, so to speak, that's when they want to go back in, so like, they come to me or to one of my organizations and they're like, I want to, they're mad, sad, depressed, anxious, what have you. And that's the equivalent of being, in my analogy, being shot. Yeah. Right. So it's like, got it. You got great energy. I appreciate, you've been wronged. You have been shot. But let's make sure, like acknowledging that, right, is so important, because part of the reason why they're upset is probably because nobody's acknowledged the wound, right? Because they're walking around shot, right, bleeding out, and the rest of society or people in their peer group are well, they're saying you're not shot, you're fine. Here's a Band-Aid, and they're like, I'm literally bleeding out and dying, and so they're being gaslit to thinking that they haven't been shot. So, there's healing and just letting them know, okay, yes, you have been shot. I see it. You have been shot. Let's triage it. Let's address it, and then we can kind of build this movement forward. And I guess like the longevity of the movement. And so but as you do that, it kind of builds the bench, right? Because then once you've healed one person, that one person will go help heal somebody else, and that person will go help heal somebody else. And then you kind of get this nice big swell of people who are now emotionally ready, cared for, and stable enough to more effectively hit the long game. Right. Because Dr. King, Nelson Mandela, Mahatma Gandhi, they were all successful because they did those things, right? Like they deeply cared for the people, and helped nourish them and help heal them, take them on their journey. And then over time, they were able to create this huge swell of healed humans. And that's what ultimately got them to change, right? It wasn't just because the leader was dynamic. Right? Because we have we have a lot of dynamic leaders, right? Like we elect a lot of dynamic leaders, right? Like there's a lot of, congressional leaders that are very dynamic, but they're not able to create the change necessarily that they're trying to seek, right? So like even when I'm trying to work with congressional leaders to get change, I know that they can only take me so far. They're almost just like a microphone.
Why do you think that is?
Because they have the same problem that I have. The power is with the people. And that's something I think as the people, we forget. We feel powerless, right? Because all these other people are in charge. But if we kind of got together, we could take that power back. But we have to be healed a little bit and work together in order to do that. And one of the tools that they use for us to not do that is to create this division, right? And that there is a left and a right in these things. I like to say like the left and the right are two wings of the same bird.
Yeah.
We have more in common than we realize. And most people are in the middle anyway.
Yeah.
They may lean right or lean left, but most people are in the middle, and most people, get along with most people out in everyday life.
Yeah.
Right. Like they work together, they, go to the grocery store, we operate effectively, and we do a lot of things really well collectively as a human race, but those aren't necessarily highlighted. We highlight the differences and then we yell at each other. And then we yell at each other over social media because that's easier. Yeah. Right? Like, because I forget who said this, but it's, people are hard to hate up close.
Yeah.
Like it's easy to,
it's easy.
It's easy. Right. Keyboard. And it's easy to do that. But when you kind of come up close, and we're up close a lot, right? Like we forget about that. Like when we're out in the world, most people are acting like decent humans.
Yeah.
There's always somebody yelling at the cashier, but like, most people aren't yelling at the cashier.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like most people
true.
Are saying please and thank you. And yes, no, paper, plastic, like most, there's always a dick, but there's a whole lot of people who are not. So it's reminding people of that we are capable of working together, and we quite often do, and that we agree on a lot of things, but that's not so popular. So as we're kind of as you're like taking a movement of any kind, I always like try to target the middle.
Yeah.
Like your view may be on one side or on the other, or it might seem wherever it is, but I'm always kind of like trying to figure out how the middle feels. And I feel like a lot of times if it's not an issue that directly impacts the human personally, they are essentially blissfully unaware, right? Like if you're not a person of color, you may be blissfully unaware of the challenges that people of color face. If you're not a woman, you may be blissfully unaware.
Yeah.
Right. And so then I put my blissfully unaware humans in the middle.
Mm.
Right. And so like that's an opportunity. They need a little bit of like love and education, because they just are who they are at this point. Right. Like not every person can know what it's like to walk in the shoes of every other person that ever exists.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's all different kinds of intersections and barriers for what have you, but you only know what you know. So just maybe accepting that that's where they are.
Yeah.
And instead of being mad at them for being, let's say, ignorant, because I see that too, right? Like they'll be like, oh, they're ignorant, they're this or that, and I'm like, well, that may be so, but like, what do you want to give them information or not? Like, do you want, I'm like, there's an opportunity there where you could have a conversation. And if that was somebody close to you or somebody who cared about you, would just have the conversation.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be fussing at them. So it's coming together with a little bit more compassion. And I mean, and then though, on the flip side of that, those are the people that you can win, right? Like the middle you could win, but there's always going to be an actor that none of that works for.
What do you mean by that?
There's no amount of love and compassion you can give a party to give you what you need, right? So like
there's that.
Exactly. So there's that demographic. And so like that demographic, for one of the issues I work on is sexual assault in the military. There is no degree of compassion that I can give to certain senior leaders to convince them that retaliating against sexual assault victims is not okay. There's absolutely none. Like I give them education, I give them compassion, I give them those things, but I only do it because I already know the result. I only do it to show that I did it, essentially, right? Like I call it walking a camel through the eye of the needle, and I'm like, I told you, so nobody can come back and say I didn't tell you, because after I've gone through this whole thing and created this whole long paper trail showing that I told you, now I'm going to fight you, essentially. You know what I mean? Like now, like the gloves are coming off, and we're going to, once we get to the end of that journey, you're going to lose, you know what I mean? But during that time, while I'm being, kind and respectful and threading the needle and all these things, what I'm doing is I'm building the bench.
Yeah.
I'm healing a bunch of people along the way. So this may take me some time to do, but at the end of the day, I've been able to bring this whole mass of people that I'm educating and that I'm healing and that I'm just bringing with me. And they're like, oh yeah, wow. No, wait, that happens. I'm like, that happens. They're like, you told him and he didn't just fix it. I'm like, I know, it's crazy, right? Like he could have just fixed it. It was so easy. He could have fixed it like, 12 steps ago, but he just didn't. They're like, but you told him again. I'm like, I bet I did. And so I just thread it. And so then I've got this huge swell of humans now at the end. And so that is what makes you win. Because now, like I said before, the power's with the people. I've built the bench. So like when you are the minority trying to affect change on the majority. So, right. So like I would be the minority in the sense that I'm just Lindsay trying to affect change in the U.S. military. So the military is the majority. I'm the minority. There's no way little Lindsay is stronger than the U.S. military. Not even on a good day, right? But over time, once I've built the bench and I've built all these other, coalitions and alliances with different organizations, different humans, then I will be, and then they will be the minority. Okay. And so it's because the majority is never going to give up power to the minority under any circumstances. Okay. They're just, it just doesn't, like there's no incentive for them to do so. So we have to become more powerful than them. Okay. And that always can be done, but it's that long arc. It's the moral arc bend towards justice. Like you got to really be strategic in your thinking and have that grit and have that patience and be working on yourself every day. And then as you're working on yourself, you're like helping others work on themselves. So you're just continuing churning till you become more powerful than your adversary. And then it's the tipping point, as Malcolm Gladwell, he's got a book called The Tipping Point. You're just kind of like building it until everything tips in your favor. So sorry, that was a mouthful. There was a lot there.
So what got you into being a rabble rouser? Because you have your LGBTQI plus resource center, and you have your nonprofit where you help military members who are victims of sexual assault, especially if they face retaliation in the military. So what got you into activism?
Well, I guess I probably started off like as one of the people I was describing before, is like mad, right? And like just showing up like, why is this happening? But then like starting to do the work and then just figuring out through trial and error what works and what didn't work. Some of these systems I thought could be changed within, you know, like maybe you join the military or you become a DA civilian employee, or you become a congressional leader, you do some things like this, and then you try to fix these things. But I personally have come to the I am of the opinion that these structures are not, they can't be changed from within, that they can only be changed from without, and that you need people to make that happen. So once I figured that out, that's how I structured all my work.
Okay.
Right. And structured all my organizations and all that kinds of things. But while I'm like, you know, I call it, I'm in the arena getting my ass kicked, like trying out all my strategies. I'm like studying other people's strategies, right? Like studying Dr. King.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, and studying Nelson Mandela and studying Gandhi and figuring out why were they successful? What kind of lives did they lead? You know, what were they like before, you know, before they were leading movements?
Okay.
Right? Like what were they doing before that? How did they kind of get there? And they all kind of got there like on accident.
So it was a lot of research.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, they all got there on accident. You know, they didn't wake up one day and decide that they were going to march on Washington, right? They just made a bunch of small choices that over time just kind of grew and grew, and they would tackle one problem, and then they'd tackle another, and then they'd tackle another, and then as they did, more people joined them.
Okay.
You know, because of also how well they were good at
speaking.
Well, speaking, but like coaching and loving and mentoring them, right? Like nobody just follows you because you're good at speaking. Like you got to be a solid human, right? Like, and so as they're solid human and really kind of like helping other people grow, those people are helping other people grow, right? So then it just keeps building. And then once you get to a certain point, it kind of builds kind of fast, right? Because you just kind of built this huge swell that, it's hard to deny the momentum you've created. So if that makes sense.
Yeah. I had a thought and then I lost it. So first you have to pick a specific cause and then do your research, right? What else would someone who is like trying to be a rabble rouser need to know and understand to make change? Like, you know, do they just go out, organize protest, or should they like communicate with specific people to implement change? Like, what are things that you learned along this journey of rabble rousing?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think if anybody wants to get into this, the first thing they need to do is get into therapy. You know, and I don't mean that in a cheeky way, but I just mean like really, really like if you're going to commit to something like this, you're committing to some hard work, make sure that you've got a lot of support structures in place and an amazing self-care routine. And if you don't have a therapist, go find one, because you don't want to be trying to find a therapist when you're like really, really low. Try to find when you're like medium.
That's a good,
you know, and you're kind of like, I'm not terrible right now, but I'm just kind of okay, but I'm about to do some hard shit. So let me go find somebody that works that works for me. But then as you're kind of picking your issue, also starting where you're at with what you can do, because some people have more, I use the analogy spoons, more spoons than others. And what that means for those who don't know that analogy, it just means like you've got like the mental capacity or the emotional capacity to do something, or the physical capacity, right? Like it's like your gas tank, if you've got enough gas in the tank, you can do more. If you've got less gas in the tank, you can do less.
Right.
So some people can't do a lot because they don't have a lot of gas in the tank. So it's okay to do what you can do where you're at. And that may be sending emails, just sometimes even social media posts, educating people on things like that. Even talking to somebody who's just slightly maybe opposed to your view. I think what some people focus on, which kind of really drains the gas in their tank, so to speak, is they'll get somebody on the far one side, try to convince somebody on the far other side. That will absolutely never happen. It will 100% never happen. The only person that can get one person on one side to move at all is somebody close to them. So you can only get somebody to move over maybe like one block at a time, one step at a time. So that's why I'm always targeting the middle, because because if I'm on one side of an issue, and I'm trying to get people on the other side, I can't actually talk to the people on the other side. I got to talk to somebody in the middle, and then that middle is going to bring in the others. So that's what I say. So folks, get a good therapist, start where you're at, do what you can. But if you're looking to like really affect some serious change, you need to collaborate. You need to talk to other people who are in this space, see that you're already in, see what they're doing, because you want to collaborate and capitalize on each other's efforts. So you can just start by joining some of their efforts. And then if something doesn't necessarily exist yet, you kind of just maybe start it. Say like, all right, well, I'm concerned. Like if you're in Sanford and you're like me and you're like, I'm concerned about the rights of our LGBTQ population in our little town. Well, you may not have the capability to start a resource center, but you can say like, I'm going to meet at this coffee shop on Tuesdays to and see if anybody shows up to talk to me about it. Okay. And you could put up a flyer at whatever place, or make a Facebook post or whatever it is, and kind of just say,
set up meetings.
Right. Yeah. Meet people, and then you can meet people who are like-minded, and then you can kind of strategize together, because, like if we're going to move the needle on LGBTQ issues, I think a great place to start is to figure out who your allies are already, get them, but then starting to get a couple more, right? Like, can I get somebody to put up a flag in their business establishment? Can I get somebody to put up a flyer that talks about resources? What are some smaller asks that I can get, that can just, where I can get a business owner or a councilman or a local leader to kind of be like, oh no, that's not a big muscle move for me. I can do that.
Yeah.
And instead of going into places where you're not even welcome at all, like there's a lot of churches in this community where I think, I think if they could shoot lightning rods at us as we walked in, they would, but like not starting there, or maybe not even going there ever, because that's a group you probably never affect, but hitting more of the middle folks. So that's what I would do. And I hate to even say this out loud, but because it sounds kind of cliche, but you can't worry about it as much. And it's hard for somebody who's being like discriminated against or persecuted to hear that. But the more upset and the stress and the anxiety that whatever this issue causes you, it only injures you. Right? So like, being discriminated against or what have you, that's its own thing. But now, it's like, as the saying goes, it's like, what's the saying about poison? It's like taking, trying to poison somebody else, but you're poisoning yourself. It's, what's that?
So you mean like, for example, like the church thing. Like if you're a churchgoer, but you're being discriminated against from that church because of, you know, your lifestyle.
Right.
Recommend finding a new church home, or
Well, it depends on how many spoons you have. Right. So, you know, if you're not feeling so great and it's causing you a whole lot of pain, then you should probably go find a new church until you got some more gas in your tank. But if you've got some gas in your tank, then what might be a better, or might not, maybe not better, what might be another way to approach it is to, if you're queer, show up in that church and just be fucking queer, be happy.
Okay.
You know, because they don't want you to be happy.
Yeah.
You know, they don't want you to be queer and happy. So like all my queer kids here, I'm like, y'all just need to be out in the community, being as happy as you can, living your life. Don't be living in fear of all these people. Live your life. You get to choose how you get to live. So just you choose. And then as the problem sets come up, right, we're going to deal with them. It's not that we're not going to deal with them, but the more upset we are and the more anxious and depressed and all those things, it only, what is it? It's like, oh God, it's the drinking poison, but expecting the other person to die, right? That's what it is. Because so and so when I say, you know, don't worry about it, I don't mean don't work on it. I'm like, but we're gonna do it from a healthy place. Like we're gonna with our gas tank full, be like, you know what, I got it. That's a shit problem set, but we're gonna fucking work on it. Okay. And I'm gonna live my best fucking life. So you know what I mean? Like
so you're saying like if you're experiencing like this discrimination and or being like if you're experiencing something very unjust, first work on healing yourself, filling up your gas tank.
Right.
And once that gas tank is full, then you can start the activism. Right. Like don't come from a place with a low gas tank because the effectiveness isn't going to be as beneficial, right?
Right. Because one, you're probably not gonna be able to convince anybody of your position because you're already tired. But then secondly, you won't be able to sustain it. Right. You're already, you know, drawn from the negatives. You know, you're in the red in your bank account. So you got to build that up before you can do something. And staying as centered as you can while doing it. Because if you're noticing you're falling off your center, right? Like you're getting stressed, you're getting anxious, your adrenaline is spiking. That's a sign that you need to go back and work more on yourself. And it's not that my adrenaline and things like that don't spike, you know, or I don't get upset and things like that. But I'm in a position or a place now to it's like where I notice it and then I go back, right? Because it's just a way to burn out really, really quick, right? Because you can only do so much, right? And you can't do much in those states, right? Having your adrenaline peak or being anxious all the time and having your heart palpitate, those are literally killing you from the inside. And that's what they want, right? Like, you know, the people that are trying to, you know, to harm you, that's what they want. So they want you to be scared. They want you to be anxious. They want you to be depressed, and they want you to stay in that state. You know, like I get, you know, death threats. Not so many lately. Thanks. But when I get them, like I've just gotten to the point like they've become so many. I just am like, take a fucking number. Like, I'm like, there's so many different groups of people that don't like me. I'm like, just take it. I'm like, just take a number because I could be upset every time I leave the house. I could be, you know what I'm saying? Like I could
be scared every time you leave the
house.
Like
at some point I just have to choose whether or not I want to live. Right. Like I just have to make that choice. Like I could die. A lot of us could die, but I'm like, but I'm not dead yet. That's good. We'll keep that moving. But like, I can't be effective. That's not the life I want to live. Right. Okay. Like I don't want to live being afraid. I just want to live out loud. I want to be happy and I'm going to be happy as many days as I can. I'm going to be centered as many days as I can. And I'd rather do that and die than die being afraid.
Wow.
You know?
And that's from filling up your gas tank.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's not for everybody. you know. So if if this isn't for you, please do whatever it is that how you feel in your heart and whatever it takes to fill your gas tank. But being a rabble rouser is a whole different ball game, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's a whole different ball game. It's not for everybody, and it doesn't have to be for everybody. You can just do what you can where you're at, right? Like make flyers for somebody like, you know, like people like me need all kinds of help. I need social media people. I need fundraising people. I need all kinds of people. So like you can do what you can where you're at. You don't have to do all that craziness, but that's how the process works, right? And that's how we make it to the finish line, wherever that is.
Are you comfortable talking about like projects that you've worked on or currently working on that have helped, or yeah, like you want to talk about successful projects or unsuccessful projects, or things that you're currently working on as a professional rabble rouser?
Yeah, we've got a couple, got a lot of different projects in the, I guess, in the queue at the moment. And I don't know that you will ever get there where you're like done. Does that, so it's like you have successful days.
Yeah.
Or, you know, like, or you know, you win certain battles, if you will, but the war just continues on and will continue on for the generation, for all the rest of the generations. But I guess like successful moments are when we're able, like we just went to DC last month, and we brought a bunch of Gold Star families. A Gold Star family is a family who's lost their service member, or who's, you know, whose child lost their life serving in the military. And so these service members that had died were all died as a result of essentially like reporting to sexual assault, retaliation, or something along those lines, right? Maybe some of them had killed themselves because they had been retaliated against after reporting. We call that murder by suicide, right? Because it's just the command had retaliated against them so much that they felt that they had no other option other than to kill themselves. Other people were murdered. In some of the cases, the military didn't acknowledge that it was a murder, and they tried to cover it up. So it's helping all these different families get justice. But a lot of these families we've been working with for like years, but we brought them all to DC for this like really big like trip, and we did some protesting. We met with different congressional leaders, and that was a very successful trip in that we were able to get a lot of congressional leaders on board to get these cases like sent to the FBI, so the FBI can independently investigate them.
Nice.
We got a lot of major news networks to cover it, and then there's going to be a documentary made on it as well. So it was successful in that it was successful on a lot of levels because the families were able to meet other families, and that was very healing for them because they're from all over the country, so they feel very isolated, right? Because they don't know a lot of Gold Star families, right? Like how many people does anybody know who's got a child that served in the military that was murdered while serving in the military, right? Like that number dwindles so quickly. So then they got to meet a bunch of other people like them. They got to build. So you know. So as I say about building the bench, they were building the bench. We're working on healing them. They got to meet others. They got to find strength in each other. They did that. Next, a lot of them were able to get movement on their specific case, right? Like the FBI is going to take this case or that case, or these congressional leaders are sending letters to the president or whoever to help action their specific cases, or legislation is going to get passed for this case or this case, you know, to kind of help funnel them specifically. But then, all right, but then on the next level, we got all this great news coverage, and a documentary is going to get made. So so now we can build the bench even more, right? And I can target again this middle who may have no idea that any of this is occurring, right? And then I can start to kind of get them on board, like, okay, now how can you help? How can you help amplify this issue? As we're starting to educate and get more people together, that helps, again, like I said, build that swell so I can take over the majority as the little baby. minority, as the little Lindsay can take it all. So that trip was extremely successful in that way. But that was, to be fair, that trip was like years in the making.
Yeah.
Like we had to do a lot of different things. We had to build relationships with news networks to, for them to know that we're not crazy and the stories we have are solid. And we have, as I say, we keep the receipts. We got the receipts, right? So we had good relationships. And then we had built relationships with the different congressional offices too, because they don't always want to meet with you either, because they're like, this is just another crazy person, right? And so, again, building those relationships over time. And so then over time, able to capitalize on all of that in one kind of really big way was super successful. So all the little things add up, because for years we had been, reaching out to some of these networks or to some of these leaders and kind of just getting what felt like lip service. But over time, all of your checks cleared, right? And so that, so they're just like, well, that check cleared. Okay, that check didn't bounce. So maybe they're not crazy, and it's just starting to get picked up a little bit more. So having the patience and the grit, right?
Yeah.
You're able to build that bench and to keep it going. So those are some of the successful things that we've been able to do recently. As we're burning it down. As I like to say, the patriarchy is not going to burn itself down, right? Like,
as we burn down the patriarchy. So I have takeaways from this conversation about activism. We have pick one specific cause.
Yeah.
And just start small.
Yeah.
Do your research. Get into therapy.
Yeah. Get some therapy.
Yeah. Filling up the gas tank, finding your self-care routine. Set up meetings with to find allies or to network with people in the community. And then patience.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. No, that was a great overview. Patience. Nobody likes patience. Patience is stupid, but
like you said, your trip to DC, that was years in the making. And it's because you had to start small and establish those relationships, all those things before, you got to, and now it's growing, right?
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Is there any other takeaways you want to bring up from your experience so far as a professional Rabble Rouser?
I mean, I guess just in closing, I would just say, just start where you are, and that it's okay to be a mess and to be scared, but and all the things. But if every day you're working on yourself, you're moving the whole thing forward. Because the other thing is too, it can be very overwhelming. But you only change the world by changing yourself. And so I always remember that. I say that to myself every day. You only change the world by changing yourself. If I have made myself better today, I have helped change the whole thing. Because people are watching.
Yeah.
People are watching you change yourself every day. I'm not even the same person I was 6 months ago. I'm a completely different person. And people in my life, they see that. They know that. And so they're watching. That doesn't go unnoticed by them. And so they're like, if it was a good change, hopefully, right? They're like, they saw how I did it, right? Because they were watching it the whole time. They're like, oh God, she did all of that despite the circumstances that she was in. We did all of that. My brother died in December. So that was 5 months ago. But on the same day that he died, I essentially had to depose a 3-star general later that afternoon. So he died at 6 a.m. And at, I think it was at 6 p.m. So it was 12 hours. I was sitting there fussing at a 3-star, right? Within that span, and then on the back end, and then a month after that, testifying at trial for the death threats I was receiving.
Okay.
Right. And then, you know what I mean? And just bing, bang, boom. And then 2 months after that, going to DC, right? And doing that huge thing. So just doing all of these things despite, I don't say despite the tragedies, but while in it, you know? And so people got to see what that looked like,
Okay.
you know, and that wasn't an easy muscle movement by any stretch, you know, even for me, you know, not like it was certainly difficult, but people got to watch me navigate it with as upset and as, you know, as whether I was a hot mess or completely on my A game, they got to see what that looked like.
Yeah.
And so they could decide to take what, you know, like, okay, that's something Lindsay did that I can do, or that was stupid that Lindsay did. I'm not going to do that. They got to just watch it. And so just like having folks remember, like, it doesn't matter how it looks sometimes. You just do it.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to look how it looks.
Yeah.
Right. Perfection is the enemy of good enough. Just like, you're already good enough. Just do it. Yeah. You're going to look back and be like, I should have done that differently, blah, blah, blah. But at least you're out there. As Brene Brown says, at least you're in the arena getting your ass kicked, right? Like, you're brave enough to do that. Whatever, who cares? Do what you can where you're at. If you make a mistake, welcome to the club, right? Like, take a number. Everybody else does. You know, do what you can. Work on yourself, and you will, in fact, change the world. So.
Nice. Well, thank you, Lindsay. As we come to the end of this podcast or this episode, is there anything else you would like to promote or?
No, I mean, well, this happens to be June, so, you know, do all your fun Pride stuff this month, you know, support your LGBTQ community, you know, do what you can to let them know that they're loved and supported this month, and also love and support yourself this month.
Yay. I love your shirt, by the way. It says be you.
That's right. Be you, y'all.
Yes. Awesome.
All day long. Well, thank you, Elise. Do you have anything?
No, I need to use the bathroom.
Noted.
No, just you know, keep on keeping on.
Sounds good.
This was Let's Talk About It with Lindsay Knapp
and Elise Williams.
All right, see y'all next time. Bye.
Bye.